On Blast.
This is the On Blast podcast, something that we're still calling I'll name this football pod later. It's week 3, so I guess they're still later. But we are back to talk about the NFL from a gambling perspective, and I'm joined by my dude, Mr. Matt Russell, sports betting professional and the host of the Windows Sports Betting Podcast. Mr. Russell, how are you doing entering week 3 of the NFL season, my dude?
I'm good, man. You know, just keep on trucking, right? Everybody was a winner last week. It was just money is just being handed out from the sports books. Everybody's just buying stuff. The economy, we are back. We are rolling entirely because of week 2 and the sports book. Just giving it back. And what could possibly go wrong from here, right?
Hey, this is what I want to say all the time. I'll tell people, I'll put out a notice to everybody, okay? I think everybody had a good week in week 2. Like, I'm going to say I was 11-5 against the spread, and our crew won a pools ticket, which wasn't for that much because everybody won pools. So that's all I'm saying. Take the early wins. If you pay attention to these things every NFL season, you'll know that early on you take the wins as they come, but just know as a warning, Vegas is coming. And as you look at the week 3 lines, there's so many crazy games. Just, you know, as you talk about all the time, teams that you want to bet for or bet against or whatever, just teams that you feel you got a good read on, but then they end up playing each other or vice versa. Week 3 is going to be interesting. Week 3 is going to be very interesting.
Absolutely, right? We call them the bet-on teams versus the bet-off teams, right? And when two bet-on teams play each other, that's no good. And when 2 bet-off teams play each other, that's no good either. So this week week 3 is my favorite week every year. And listen, that could come back to haunt me. But listen, everything I do could come back to haunt me. So I might as well just say it as it is, right? And so week 3 is my favorite because we get 2 weeks of that built up overreaction stuff, right? And we get to see the difference between panic and focus. And fans panic. Bettors panic. Teams on the field, they focus after having 2 bad weeks, right? And that's what I think we're going to see week 3. We do every single time. And I was going to come on here and I was going to set up outside and I was going to set up with a, like back in the day where parents or grandparents would dry their clothes outside. You get the old clothespin going. This week is grab a clothespin, put it on your nose, because we are betting on some stinkers this week. It is going to be a horror show. Like, it's probably best if you place your bets and then you get induced into some sort of coma on Sunday, because you're not going to want to watch what we're going to do this week. It's going to be gross. But you know what? Statistically, it's profitable. So you're just going to have to hold your nose, artificially or otherwise, and just kind of roll with it this week.
I like it. And as always, we like to start the pod with what we learned from week prior. So what did I learn from week 2, Mr. Russell? Because for people who might be new to the pod, what we try to do on this, I'm coming from, your Joe Public gambler, the random guy here, maybe making a couple bets here and there, maybe the dude going out to play his pro line ticket. And we developed this podcast off of conversations that we used to have all the time when we worked together, where I would come in on the Monday and be like, oh man, I lost on this play or I lost on that play. And you would be like, dude, how did you not take the extra half point? And so when we start here and say, what did I learn from week 2? Another very important lesson. Obviously, when you're gambling, points matter. But half points, okay?
Every single one, man.
Matter so much. And I could have imagined our conversation on the Monday being, hey, man, so I had the Pats at plus 3.5. So that game literally came down to Cam Newton on the 1 for the game. And as we look at week 2, in terms from the Patriots standpoint, you got a Raiders team that looked pretty good on Monday night, but it's Raiders plus 6 in New England. And, I feel like the Pats are good. I feel like if it's under a touchdown, Raiders on a short week, as long as it's, again, remains under a touchdown, I'm okay with still riding with the Patriots from what I've seen. Like, Cam looks legit. But I'm going to ask you, is that Am I wrong there, or is that too many points at 6?
No, you're fine. I think this is a prime spot. And listen, over the years, the Patriots have been my trouble spot, right? Because every week they're overvalued based on the numbers. But again, we talked about this before the season started, and basically every week, maybe till the end of time, right? They just do everything correctly outside of the framework of a box score, right? And so it's never a bad thing to go with the Patriots, but when you can get some decent value after a team has this primetime win, right? We always talk about primetime games and how that affects the perception going forward. In this case, it's perfectly set up for a Patriots bet, right? You've got Western team having to travel, short week, big win. John Gruden running across the field, mask akimbo, just like looking for people to hug. And it's like, now you're going to go to the Patriots and like Belichick, he's disheveled. He looks like a hobo more than he's ever looked at like a hobo before. And you know, when Bill Belichick is in hobo mode, he's other ready. Team is in big trouble. And so it's a unique offense that the Raiders aren't going to have enough time to prepare for, which, by the way, like you say, they look good. And yeah, you're not wrong necessarily. But again, when I go into the box score, I want to look, the first thing I look at is yards per play, right? Ooh. How did the yards per play break down? And the Saints were much better from a yards per play standpoint. They were borderline actually Cleveland-Cincinnati ratios, right? Where Cleveland was like 2.5 to 3 point. I think she might even be 3.5 more yards per play than Cincinnati was on that Thursday night game. And we all saw what that should have been from a blowout standpoint. The Saints were that much better than the Raiders from a yards per play standpoint. And for some reason, they just were able to sort of dink and dunk their way down the field like the Bengals were, in this case, all the way to a victory for the Raiders. And so that was as fraudulent of a victory, I think, as we've seen all season. And when you're talking about going across country to deal with a Patriots offense, that is a tough thing to prepare for. And now we're seeing that Cam can throw it a little bit here, or a bit, right? Yeah. And this Raiders defense is not good. And so, this is one that we can be pretty comfortable with. And I can pretty much assure you that the Patriots are going to be on all my contest plays this week.
Yeah, I love the Patriots there, -6 for sure. We mentioned the Raiders on Monday night against the Saints, and the Saints, Drew Brees. I mean, I hate talking about legends and saying, are they washed? But Drew Brees did not look good. And when you're doing the dink and dunk stuff and you don't have Michael Thomas to dink and dunk to, that's kind of the Saints offense that you get. They did not look good. And as we look into week 2, they're at home to the Packers. I like the Packers at +3 because I'm just looking at it saying, give me all the points. Even if I think the Packers are overrated, even if I think, they've looked, the offense and Aaron Rodgers has looked pretty good against some not so good teams so far, but I'm still in a position where you're telling me I'm going to take the points. I'm going to give me the points with Aaron Rodgers in this situation. As I just watched Drew Brees, I'm okay with taking the Packers here.
So it's funny because I feel like you just made the case in a lot of ways for why you should be taking the Saints.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like you just did everything and then you just sort of did, but like I went the points and da-da-da-da. So a couple of things here, right? So as much as we, saw it's the same thing that applies to the Raiders in reverse, right? Like if the Raiders gave up, and I've got it right here, 7.4 yards per play to the Saints, which by the way, like 5 is kind of your sort of average, right? Like low 5s to just sort of give people framework. So if you're in the 4s, that's not good. And that's what the Raiders were this past week. And if you're up in the 7s, like that's about as high as you can do. So you're right. Drew Brees' arm is mega washed. But you know what? That was the case last season. This isn't new. This didn't happen this summer. That was the case last season. And you're right about the Michael Thomas thing when you don't have that connection level where you can get those first downs and whatnot. But again, they were still 7.4 yards per play. So it's not like the offense is broken in any way. No, for me, the big takeaway from that game was how bad the defense was in that they didn't clue in that the Raiders were just going to dink and dunk them down the field, right? And that's what allowed the Raiders to win the game with a sub 5 yards per play. And it's like, why wasn't the defensive line able to get to Derek Carr? Like the Raiders were without their right tackle, I believe it was. And then Richie Incognito, their guard, left the game in the middle of the game as well. And so that should have been like Cameron Jordan and those guys just eating. And for some reason, it wasn't. And so going into this game, this is a classic buy low, sell high, and we're going to be all over these all throughout this week. Where you've got a team that the line was -4 going into Monday night, and I grabbed Green Bay +4 because I had a feeling we weren't going to love everything that we saw from the Saints this past Monday, and sure enough, it opens 2.5, and it immediately shoots to 3. So people who are on top of this stuff on Tuesday morning, and this lasted like 5 minutes. We're just throwing money at the 2.5 because they know that the Saints aren't nearly as bad as it looked on Monday night, and that the Packers, and you're right, man, the Vikings and the Lions, and a banged up Lions team and a Vikings team in that first game. And listen, we're going to get into the Vikings a little bit later. My general opinion of the Vikings right now is that they're trash. They are not good. They are a stinky football team. So if I'm going to apply that logic, I have to realize, though, that they still had 7 yards per play against the Packers. So apply that into the Packers, where now all of a sudden we're looking at a team that's going to have this – they have this road game now against one of the better teams. Like, it is such a step up in weight class for the Packers, or at least it should be. And it's just a spot where, we talk about the sort of the underdogs, the public dogs, right? And at 71%, I think, is what the betting tickets are right now. 75% is the betting tickets right now on the Packers, right? Okay. And I just mentioned, like, the money has moved it from 2.5 to 3, like, right off the bat. And so be very careful in how much you like the Packers. For me, I'm going to come back on the Saints in this one at -3 and create myself sort of a little tiny middle of -3 +4 in that game.
I like it. And again, it's one of these things where I look at the number and it's like, I like I'm picking every game, so I'm going to take the Packers if force-fed just because I like having the points as a general whatever, and I don't mind having the points with Aaron Rodgers. But everything you just said, it's totally true, right? Like, the Packers, how impressed should we be by what they did against those two crap teams so far? So it's going to be super interesting to see, and hey, anytime we're going to sit and watch Drew Brees against Aaron Rodgers, who's complaining about that, right?
No, exactly. It's going to be great.
I bypassed something, though, involving the Patriots, and I feel like we need to update the score here, the scorecard overall. Sure. As Tom Brady won week 2 to tie the score 1-1 with Bill
the power
Belichick.
rankings.
The power rankings. Yes.
Tom is power ranked 1 and Bill is power ranked 2.
Right. Going into week 2, though, in terms of Mr. Tom Brady and Tampa Bay,
right?
Bucs -6 in Denver, and I don't have much on this other than really I think you got to see what the Bucs offense can do last week. Like, obviously, Brady and Mike Evans look to be more on the same page in week 2. I'm not falling for the Leonard Fournette stat line, even though I do have him on my fantasy bench, but I'm not falling for that just because he busted out one big run late in the game to really inflate his production. But overall, as I said earlier with the Patriots, at 6 points against what's my guy's name? Driscoll?
Jeff Driscoll. Absolutely.
And I'm not mad at Jeff Driscoll at all. He was like serviceable. He was kind of frisky when he came in that game, but at 6 points, I'm okay with the Bucs.
I'm just going to say it. I couldn't disagree with you more. I love the Broncos.
That's the beauty of this pod. Hey, this is why we're here. This is why we're here.
You've picked the games that we've talked about up to this point, right? And it's like, oh, he's on the Patriots minus the thing, and he's on the Saints minus the thing, and you're like, I want points. And I'm like, listen, I am the card-carrying member, like vice president of the Gimme the Points team, right? Or the organization of GiveMeThosePoints.com. I don't know if that's a website. I don't know who runs it. Stay away from it.
I'm going to make that on a t-shirt. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt.
GiveMeThosePoints.com. Listen, this Tampa thing it's fraudulent right now, man. It is mega fraudulent right now. And we saw it against the Saints where it's like they could barely move the ball, right? 4.1 yards per play. 4.1. Not great, right? And so then we go and we see the Raiders easily moving the ball, at least from a sort of short, range type of a thing, right? They're at least able to score points. And then you've got Tampa going against Carolina, and we talked about it last week. Like if there was ever an opportunity for the for the Bucs to flat out blow out a team, it has to be this week against a Carolina defense that is atrocious. And so what happened? They covered, but it took your boy Leonard Fournette cracking one of those hey, he probably should have just gone down to end the game type of deals, but he just kept running. And even then, right, Carolina almost backdoored it with a late touchdown to get within that 7
without McCaffrey.
And then without McCaffrey. And that's a home game. And so now we go onto the road, right, to Denver. And a lot of this is just sort of value-based, right? If Drew Lock was the quarterback, what would this number be? Wouldn't this be pretty close to that Tennessee-Denver game from Monday night where Tennessee is -3, right? Is there really all that much of a difference between Tennessee and Tampa Bay, with all things kind of being considered?
Yeah.
I don't think Jeff Driscoll is worse than Drew Lock. I actually think he's kind of a little bit better at this stage in their career, right? Drew Lock, a first-round pick, but still very young, still very immature from sort of a quarterback development standpoint. And Jeff Driscoll, the sneaky thing about him, he can run a little bit. And I love my sort of, running dual threat type quarterbacks when it comes to extending drives. And I think this game is going to be a really low scoring game. So maybe look at the under here. But I love getting +6 on this because I think this number should be 3. And I think Denver's got a legitimate chance of winning the game. And I was impressed with what I saw from Driscoll both last season with the Lions, because they lost every game, but they were in them. And it's only when he got hurt and David Blau, that name again is David Blau. When he came in, that's when things really hit the fan, right? And so Driscoll's sort of an underrated guy here who is a high recruit to Florida Gators, that kind of thing. And so he's got talent. He can run with the ball a little bit. And he did well against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that should have been out for blood, right? Down big. You knew they were going to throw. The Steelers should have been in an attack mode. And he did pretty well with 2 touchdowns, and they were very close to winning that game. And it kind of fell a little bit under the radar. But I love +6 with Denver.
So this is a beauty of this pod, right? Because, again, I'm going to throw out what I'm thinking. I then from this conversation, from, whatever injuries happen later on, let's say Friday afternoon or Saturday, I end up posting my final picks, right? On the same On Blast page, you'll be able to get my final picks. So I come here with, hey, this is what I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. And then you mention things, and it forces me to take a step back and reassess my thought process to a lot of different, as we say, narratives. And I feel like what happens a lot is we take the easy way, and I'm talking from the Joe Public side, so I'm speaking about myself. I'm not putting anyone else down but myself here. But
listen,
the Joe Public side,
85% ticket split. So when you're talking Joe Public, it's the highest split of the weekend. 85% are on are on Tampa Bay. And so you're right on it, man.
But this is what I'm saying, right? It's because, we're still on the hype of the Tom Brady, Tampa Bay stuff, and you're going against the backup QB. And so that's going to be worth just extra points right there, just on Vegas being like, ha, 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 ha. And that's where the tricks come in. So I came into this whole thing, starting the whole pod, being like, Vegas is going to get you. And now, my awareness is up now. I'm looking at it being like, okay, I'm falling into the trap already, seeing, okay, it's Bucs by 6, but as you said, should it really be that many points? Because they didn't blow out the Panthers. I watched a lot of that Panthers game, and I knew they were gonna cover. It was a tough cover, but you add in no McCaffrey, you add in the fact that, again, that Fournette touchdown, he didn't get touched. So no. I'm not buying into their running game as being, hey, they got Fournette, he's a beast. That's not it. After scoring early, they didn't really look that good for the rest of the game. So, hey, I like that. This is why we had the conversations. And it's very easy to talk me into taking points.
Yeah,
I'll
and
just
that's
say
the
that.
thing. And you're right. And I was going to ask. I was like, raise your hand if you watched any of that game, because I think that game fell a ton under the radar because it was a 21-0 game early on, right?
Yes.
And 5.9 to 6.0 in yards per play. So that is in no way a 2-touchdown type of a box score, right?
No,
And like
for
you
sure.
said, and like I said before, if he just runs and goes down and they just kneel the rest of the game out, Carolina covers that game. Or on the flip side, if Carolina scores late, they cover that game. So we're grabbing a ton of value on a sort of looking at the score, seeing that Tampa, they're back, like they won by 2 touchdowns. Yeah. And it's like, give me those 6 all day long. And you know what? If you're betting it, wait until literally 12:55 on Sunday, because we're trying to get the best price available, right? And with 85% of the tickets coming in on Tampa Bay, like this could get to 6.5. This could get to the extremely key number of 7. And when it does, that's when we're really going to love it. But as far as a contest play, I'm going to be playing at a +6 as well, because I think they can win this game outright.
I like it. Something I didn't really like last week was that Cowboys game was super ugly. And I know the spread was floating around from like Cowboys -7 or -4, pardon me, and they didn't cover. But it was still one of the craziest comebacks ever. And despite not covering, and the Cowboys continue to just be maybe a great example of another narrative, right? Gambling always involves betting on coaches. And Mike McCarthy clearly is out here doing too much, right? There were fake punts all over the place. There's all these things going on. Like it's like in his interview with Jerry Jones, he said, hey, we're going to use analytics. We're going to go for it on 4th down. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. As you mentioned last week, the anti-Jason Garrett, right? Yeah. And my guy is doing too much. But anyways, as we come into week 3, Seahawks -4.5 against the Cowboys. And your MVP Russ bet is looking good. And this could be the same thing where we're talking about narratives coming in and overreacting to the 2 weeks that we've seen so far. I like the Seahawks just because what's not to like from what I've seen from the Seahawks so far. And the flip side of that is Dallas, I don't think they're that bad. I still don't think they're that bad. I just think McCarthy's doing too much. But I still like the 4.5 points with the Seahawks.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like you watch that first game, right? The Sunday night game against the Rams, and you're seeing him, and he's not doing too much. He's doing nothing. And he's just sort of standing there. And it doesn't help that the mask is on, right? Because you can't even see if he's saying anything to anybody. And we're so used to Jason Garrett just clapping away, like even though he's not really doing anything. And so Mike McCarthy.
Do you think someone told him about he's aware of the Jason Garrett clapper narrative?
Potentially. Honestly, I think he does. Well, I think he reads the clippings, whether it's that or people saying like, "Are you doing anything on the sideline?" Because Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator who calls the plays there, right? And McCarthy is a guy who would butt heads with Aaron Rodgers about offense and calling plays and stuff, and so he. Probably because Jerry told him to, is sort of not allowed to call the plays. And so what's left for McCarthy other than to get into his bag of alleged analytics tricks and to do a bunch of stuff? And that reared its head against the Rams, where he went for it on that 4th and 2 or 3 instead of kicking the field goal, right, to tie the game. And so when you're looking at him and you're going like, I'm always scared of these coaches who come in and they've done certain things one way, they've gotten fired, and then over the time that they've been off, now all of a sudden they're analytics geniuses. Because these guys, as you say, doing too much, they can get into the book and start reading it wrong, right? And it's not the right analytical play to go for it every single time, probably more often than most coaches think. But when you're sort of getting a little too spicy here with your going for it, then you can sort of blame that on analytics, and then the analytics crowd's over here going like, no, man, we didn't tell you that was the right move. Like, that wasn't in our book.
Some of the fake punts they tried to pull out it's just like, what are you doing? Right? Like, it didn't make sense.
Yeah, that being said, like, I think I don't really understand okay, let me change it. I understand the love for Seattle. You just talked about it, right? My MVP bet, shout out Russell Wilson, is now the favorite after
Yes.
2 weeks.
Hey,
to
you
win
were talking
the
about it
NB
from the beginning. Yeah.
Exactly. It was my favorite bet. I was like, I know it's not exactly the spiciest thing at 8-1, but like it's already down to 3-1. And so I'm loving that. So I get why people want to bet the Seahawks.
Okay.
Both these defenses are trash. In Dallas's case, it's because, again, we talked about how you and I might start for Detroit last week.
Yeah.
Like, if we're out street free agent styles, as I think we still are, sitting here on a stool and a couch, we might get in for Dallas this week because obviously their linebacking core is shredded, and now their DBs are shredded. And we saw that when it came to the Falcons, right? And like, Seattle is going to take just as much of advantage of that as the Falcons did. But on the flip side, we know Dallas can put up points. And so the number is super high from a total standpoint. I still don't understand how it stays under. I mean, obviously, if there's field goals instead of touchdowns, but there's going to be yards galore. And this is very similar to the Dallas-Atlanta game, which, by the way, and I need to mention it was even crazier as you even kind of made it out to be, because like it opened 7-6.5 and then just slowly, and then on Sunday mega crashed all the way down to Dallas -3 because in part Dallas's O-line was banged up, which of course is another issue altogether. And so you've got a team in Dallas that's just banged up on both sides. So from that standpoint, I get why Seattle is at 5 right now. It just seems like a lot of points for what is going to be kind of a track meet. And like that Atlanta-Dallas game, if we're doing a track meet, like that means there's a wider variance of what could possibly happen from a final score standpoint. And I'm kind of ready for anything. It's not like a big time, like I'm not dying to bet against Russell Wilson, but like I think you have to take the points here if you're doing what you're doing and just going like, I have to make a play on every game for the purposes of just kind of tracking it.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Just in the sense, I'm noticing a theme here, and it makes a lot of sense in theory, just in terms of week 3 craziness. There's going to be points galore. We don't really know what's going on. We know that injuries, which we'll get to in a bit, continue to play a factor. There's just so much going on. And if you can grab the points in the Vegas zone, why not? Right? So it's again, we've done how many picks so far where I've already come in being like, okay, this is what I'm thinking, but okay, as we talk this out a little bit, as we talk it through, and this is why we're here. I don't like and for people who, I'm tiptoeing with how I say this. So I'm saying this off the front end. For people who are looking for or want the picks pod where it's just like, all right, here's this game. I'm going to take this because, and I throw out some stat that I read on Twitter and blah, 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 and move on. I'm not doing that. Right?
No,
I have no interest in that.
Right.
No, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't really have an interest in that. Like, and I'm saying in terms of, because that's literally everywhere. I like saying, this is what I'm thinking. Let's talk this out a little bit. And maybe we come to a different end point. Maybe we don't. But that's what I'm here for. I'm always going to be about the conversation and adding context to what I'm thinking. And so far, I don't know how many picks we've gone through, but at least on 3 of them, I feel like I've been like, oh, okay. Yes. And that's what I'm here for. The more you know.
Yeah. We're just we're honestly, sports betting, when we're actually talking about sports betting, not making predictions, right? And people sometimes don't understand the difference between making predictions, making picks, and sports betting. And so, like, you're making picks on your thing, and you need to win to get that notch in the column. But for me, I need to win money, right? Like, that's what I do. And so what's putting us in the best possible position to win money on a consistent basis over the long term? And that's giving us more outs. Right? Like again, it comes back to sort of a poker term, right? How many outs do we have here? And to me, if we've got 4, we've got 5, and we can, if Dallas wins by 10, would you be like stunned? I wouldn't, but I wouldn't be stunned if Seattle wins by 10 either. But I'd be kind of stunned if either team won by more than that. You know what I mean? Because the other team is going to put the offensive pedal to the metal and aren't going to be stopped in a significant way that this game is a blowout, right? This is not going to be a 35-10 game one way or another. And I just rather, again, more chairs available to me for when the music stops at 0-0-0 on the clock.
No, I totally got you, man. I like, as we go along and people get more familiar with what we're doing, they'll fully understand kind of the two sides where we're coming at and what we're trying to do. But, hey, make it.
It's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle.
But hey, uphill battle. Speaking of, the Falcons, we kind of touched on them a little bit here, and I don't really got much here because I don't like the Falcons are just a joke to me. Like I don't have much on the Falcons other than like I feel bad for Falcons fans. Like if you live and die by the Falcons each and every week, like that's your squad, you ride for them. I feel bad for you. Like that's painful, painful, painful. And when you think of it, that's not even as close to the worst Falcons loss you suffered as a fan, right?
Of course not.
So, like,
it's pretty bad.
Right? It's pretty bad. Horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
But I'm guessing they're working on recovering onside kicks this week, going over the rule book for sure with their special teams. But this week, they're favored at home by 3 points against the Bears. The Bears are a team who I don't really know how they're 2-0, but they are. And this is a thing, again, where I feel like the public might be thinking, and I'm saying this not knowing, so you're going to correct me here if I'm wrong, but I feel like the public might be like, oh, Bears are 2-0. We've seen the Falcons just screw things up, take the points. I'm actually the other way, where I think the Falcons, they put up points, and I don't know if the Bears can put up points at the same clip as the Falcons. So I'm okay with taking the Falcons at 3.
So let's put that into sort of a numerical term then. So if you had to guess, if you were, again, not knowing, like you said, and let's play a fun game, I'll put you on the spot. What do you think the bet ticket breakdown is, right? Like we've talked about like how the biggest one was 85% with Tampa. And, by and large, it's a point spread, so it should be closer to 50-50 sort of on a whatever basis. So where do you think that this breaks down as far as the ticket spread?
I would say that it's close to 50-50, but I would still say it's probably like 60-40 people taking the points in the Bears.
72% for Atlanta.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So people know the Bears suck? Like, is that
well, that's the thing, right? It's this wild battle of narratives, right? And I think you're supposed to take the Falcons because, and I sort of, I don't know that we've even touched on one specifically. I guess we did with the Denver game, but Week 3 is all about betting on the 0-2 teams, right? And that's the panic versus focus, right? Your fans are panicked because you're 0-2, and the team is focused because we're like, we cannot go down 0-3. And we might not be good enough to avoid going down 0-3, right? And that's fine, but like we're going to give 110%, so to speak, on this game. And so you're supposed to bet the Falcons here as the 0-2 team against the 2-0 team. You're even supposed to bet the Falcons because they're the favorite as the 0-2 team, right? Like it's sort of counterintuitive, right? But if the market makes the better team and they're going to be the quote unquote more desperate team, then you're supposed to bet the Falcons. But then as you mentioned, your boy Quinn, right? Like, do you think there's a curling rink in Atlanta? Because if there's one curling rink in Atlanta, he needs to take the entire squad there and explain to them how spin works on the ground. Because my squad was baffled by the physics of a ball spinning like it was on that onside kick. So I don't think there's a curling rink, so they might be screwed if this happens again. I don't think you're wrong, and I sort of side with the Falcons on this. But again, by the way, Dan Quinn, his against the spread record as a favorite is atrocious. It's atrocious. As an underdog, not bad, right? Like they covered last week. It was the world's most embarrassing cover like last week, but they still covered as underdog.
They covered.
And offensively, they went up against a Dallas D that isn't all that great. They went up against a Seattle D that wasn't all that great, and they got a ton of yards in both cases. They're going to do okay against the Bears, and the Bears defense is pretty good. Again, tough to kind of tell so far. But really, to me, it comes down, how bad is the Falcons defense? Like, can Mitch Trubisky do work? Right? And if it's the Mitch Trubisky doing work against the Detroit defense in that second half from week 1, where they were so banged up that it was like, they're so banged up, they're so bad right now that even Trubisky can get it done. Is that the Falcons defense that we're working with? In which case, I'd love to grab 3.5 points right now. It was at 4 earlier in the week. So there's been enough Bears money to move it backwards, which again, relative to the fact that they're 28% on the ticket count, would indicate that the quote-unquote sharp side is the Bears. So
waiting
the trends,
on the points. I got you.
The trends say, that's what's funny about it. The trends say to take the Falcons, right, with the whole 2-0 thing. the sort of Dan Quinn is atrocious as an underdog thing leans Bears. The market is telling you to kind of take the Bears here. It's just very sort of a confusing game that I'm surprised as well that 72% of people are taking the Falcons after last week.
Yeah, I'm interested. That's very interesting.
People love offense. People love offense.
True.
And it's kind of doesn't matter. And they still cash people tickets. Like they cash me a ticket. So yeah. I'm not hating them all that much. Right?
No,
so
I hear you. That's an interesting one that I will definitely be paying attention to. And again, with all these picks that I'm saying right now on the pod, make sure that you actually go to the On Blast page to get the actual full picks that will be posted. That will be my picks. And of course, follow Mr. Russell as on Twitter as he's handing out goodies all the time.
So, our little corner of the internet. Hashtag our little corner of the internet.
Stay tuned to that for sure. But sticking with the theme of things that I learned from last week, Patrick Mahomes is actually worth $500 million. I know that sounds crazy. And when he signed the contract, you're thinking, wow, I can't believe sports contracts have gotten to that much money. Like, that's kind of insane. But then I sat down and watched the game against the Chargers. And I remembered one of the things that, one of the biggest things that you talked about last week, you mentioned you were bang on about the Browns, but you were also bang on about this game in terms of the Chiefs and Chargers, in the sense that the Chiefs, we sniffed out that 9 points being way too many points just because the Chargers played the Chiefs well last season, but also that pass rush. If there's ever a thing that slows the Chiefs offense, it's a pass rush. And what do the Chargers have? A pass rush. So it was very interesting to see. And I will say, after listening to you, I gladly grabbed the 9 points, but also got to just relax and enjoy Mahomes doing his thing and watching him come back and win. And I want to ask you this. Did you get back on the other side in terms of some in-game betting, which is something I know you like to do?
True. I didn't. And so, yes. So as far as that handicap is concerned, right, you're 100% right about the pass rush thing. Like that slows down every quarterback in the history of time, right? And you have the guys who can rush it the way the Chargers do. It means two things, right? One, it means you're in Patrick Mahomes' face. He's good enough, and you saw him scramble, and man, he's getting better and better at scrambling now, right? Like, how kind of depressing is that? Like, he had some nice runs, obviously that touchdown run in the playoffs last year, but it's like he now knows, like, this is a thing that I can do and why I can do it. But what the Chargers really do is they force him from a throwing standpoint to be patient, because they have the pass rush that is fine for sort of pressuring, but it also allows them to drop back 7 guys, right? And that's a lot of guys in coverage. And whether you're going zone, man, some sort of combination of the two, you're making him have to, again, tuck it and run, which he was doing, and it was daggers to the Chargers the whole game, or to sort of check down and not sort of, zip things in. And when he's trying to zip things in, we talked about in my preview that one of the most surprising things in my research to start this season was that the Chiefs and Mahomes, his sort of aggressiveness level was one of the lowest in the league, because what the aggressiveness level measures is whether you're trying to force things into coverage, right? And the Chiefs offense isn't incredible because he's forcing throws into coverage and they're catching balls. Like, that's kind of why the Packers offense is really good, because Rodgers is making those throws. It's terrifying because, he throws the ball, the camera zooms over, and Tyreek Hill, there's nobody within 10 yards of him. And you're like, how do you let that guy go, right? And so Andy Reid and that offense makes it he schemes it up, and they make it very easy on Mahomes. But when there's 7 guys out there in coverage, it's a lot harder to do. So we knew that they would slow them down, right? And then it's just a matter of, can you close? And of course, Herbert comes in, and he does great for a guy who was told like 5 minutes before the game started that he was the quarterback, but he made one rookie mistake, and that's what cost him the game, right? That interception where he literally could have just tripped over he could have had his shoes tied, tripped over them, and fallen for a first down, and we would have been none the wiser as to what would happen the rest of the way, but it would have made an 8-point game an 11-point game, and we're probably potentially having a completely different conversation. I was able to, and I talked about this at length on my podcast, and it's kind of the same thing as the Broncos game. Like, wait until kickoff, I was able to get plus 10 with the Chargers right before kickoff. Now, it didn't end up mattering in any way, shape, or form. But that's just as a sort of an example. So I was kicked back, right? I had the Chargers in a teaser that was up to 15.5. I had the 10. So I was kicked back. I was sort of enjoying the game. And when those sorts of games happen, like, I understand that there are upsets in the NFL. So I'm not going to kind of blindly bet the money line, because when they tied it, there was still so much time left. Like, it's not like they were like plus 200 or anything like that. So for me, there wasn't really a ton of value at any point to live bet the Chiefs. And I much rather just kind of hope the Chargers win to knock out survivor picks or, any sort of thing like that. And so the other thing is, I have, a general belief that if something's too easy, it's probably too easy. And that's that, that classic Ravens Chiefs moneyline parlay or tease that was set up on Sunday. And that's one of the reasons why the books got absolutely crushed on Sunday, is because the super obvious tease actually worked. And the super obvious moneyline parlay actually worked. Those never work. Right. And so I was just sitting there like waiting for it to not work and have the Chargers win the game, which again, they should have. Anthony Lynn punting.
Good old Anthony Lynn, your boy.
My guy. Like,
let's just give the ball back to.
It's every single time. And that's the thing. Like, you can't expect big things from the Chargers. You can expect little things like covering a 10-point spread, but you can't expect big things because Anthony Lynn will botch it.
But it's a reminder of how important, how important the reads are in terms of coaching and gambling, right? And so it sounds cliche sometimes when we're throwing out, hey, I'm taking Belichick because of this, or I'm not taking, I wouldn't take the money line with the Chargers or have real faith in them to actually beat Mahomes.
Sure. Because
Anthony Lynn's going to do something like, you know what? We probably should go for it on fourth down because we're just going to give them the ball, and all Mahomes needs is a field goal to win. Mind you, and my dude, what's my guy's name? Their kicker that hit like four straight.
Harrison Butker. Hitting 58 yarders for days. Like, it's not even a thing.
Nothing.
It was ridiculous. There's no defense for it, right? And of course, and that's the amazing part, right? Is that, Twitter immediately comes out and you get all the, probabilities, right? And they lost 10% of win probability by punting versus just going for it. I'm not even saying getting the first down. Just by going for it, they would have had a 10% better chance of winning based on all of this analytics, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's nobody in the organization whose job it is to study this and drill it into the coach, or to have like a button that says, coach, you don't want to go for this. Okay, bye. And like, just really do that one time. Have a kid in there with a math degree. No, doesn't even need a math degree.
A Madden degree. Class. Madden degree. That's what they need.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually a really great point. Yeah.
Exactly. So Chiefs, Ravens, obviously, if we look at the Chiefs heading into week 2, Chiefs, Ravens, marquee as it gets in the NFL these days. 2 big-time quarterbacks, MVP candidates, all the hoopla, a rare, I don't know how ESPN negotiated all these great Monday night games, at least early this year, because normally the Monday nighters aren't that good, but this is going to be lit. Massive game. This is a tough one, though, and again, as I go into this number, I'm taking the Chiefs at plus 3.5 against the Ravens, only based on the fact that I can get the extra half point at this moment in time. Andy Reid and Mahomes getting the half point, getting 3.5 points. I'm confident in doing that, but I'm going to be honest. I don't really like it, and I don't like.
Isn't it telling though? Isn't it telling that we're getting that half point? Right? Yeah. Like, there's some things that are sort of like hits, right? Like, I don't love it either. I'm like, Chiefs plus 3.5 points. Like, are they playing the alien team from Space Jam? Like, who are they playing? Like, what? And it's like, the Ravens are really good, right? And last year, listen, I had the Ravens before the season started to make the Super Bowl. And so, and that at the time, right, was a pretty long shotty type ticket. It was like 18-1, right? Yeah. And so as the season went along, it ended up becoming basically even money by week 10. So they were my squad. from that standpoint. But going into the playoffs, the thing that I felt was the biggest bummer with the Ravens losing was that I wasn't going to have an opportunity to bet the Chiefs at about plus 3.5 for what I thought that playoff spread was going to be. Of course, the Ravens end up losing to the Titans, and we don't get that marquee matchup that, frankly, we probably should have had maybe even the year before, too.
Yeah.
And so all of that is to say, like, yeah, the 3.5, like, it seems like a no-brainer, and when we talk about getting value and all of that kind of thing, but there is just something about this Chiefs start right now, right? That, again, they get out yards per played against the Chargers, 5.8, I think that they had offensively. So it's not like they, were blazing people out there. Same thing with the Texans, right? Wasn't all that impressive, but yet it didn't need to be in that game. And so doesn't this 3.5 go, man, they are suckering us hard in this. And the underdog is at 62% right now in bet tickets. So obviously a lot of people are on that. The number has moved up from 3 to 3.5. So again, like, it's not going to be comfortable to go into Monday night and being like, I need the Ravens to win by more than 3.5 points. Like, that seems hard to, stomach, because you've got the Chiefs who have just made this comeback and all of that kind of thing. But again, if it's Lamar Jackson who's rolling out to his left,
big trust,
and he's got 1 yard to get the first down, do you think he's going to try to square his shoulders and throw it down the field into double coverage? No, he's going to run for the first down. And that's, quite frankly, maybe the only reason the Chargers didn't win by 8 points, 7 points. You know what I mean? Like, if they go and they get a touchdown, it's a 15-point game, and it's maybe too much for the Chiefs to come back, right? And so the Chiefs defense, not all that great, right? Their run defense, not all that great. The Chargers gashed them for days with multiple guys. Even the Texans were able to run with David Johnson in week 1 until things got out of hand, and they sort of had to go to the air more often. And you just go, like, and this Ravens team, like, we've talked about, like, the Aaron Rodgers revenge tour, and it's like, okay, I think that's, like, overblown because, like, he wasn't trying before, yada, yada, yada. But as an organization, like, aren't the Ravens doing, like, and we're going to start mixing some sports up here, but are they not doing the Virginia Cavaliers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, like, these sorts of things where you get the embarrassing loss, and then the next season it's like, hold me back for the entire season type of thing. Isn't that kind of what's brewing here? And so this 3.5, I think, like, it's not the sucker bet of the week, but it's kind of telling you who you should be betting on.
Like, as I said, like, I don't feel good about it. And, I'm going to be obviously paying attention to that line all the way up until the game starts. And I come in saying my initial gut is telling me to take the point just because Mahomes and Andy Reid are getting that. But the big thing that I did also learn last week, Mahomes is worth $500 million. Part of that is because he's really good, but they need him to be really good because their defense is really bad. So, like, as you mentioned, if that's what the Chargers offense was doing, right, maybe the Ravens with, their running attack and Lamar just being on one again this season, do they build up a lead that's too big for Mahomes to be able to come back? And, they're not going to get, we know that Lamar isn't going to throw across his body because why would he do that when, as you mentioned, he could run for 15 yards. So it's
or
true.
Two.
And it's another one of those games where I'm coming in saying this, but as we talk it through, which is what I love to do on this pod, I'm like, interesting.
The other thing is, do you think they're going for it on 4th and 1 if this game goes to overtime? I do, right? I think the Ravens
already know the answer to that, right? Like, what was it?
Right?
Was it last season where they had the shot of Harbaugh and Lamar on the sidelines, and Lamar's just basically telling Harbaugh we're going for it, right?
Yeah, like, and the key to their loss was they didn't get those 4th and 1s against Tennessee, and that was the high leverage plays, and that's why they lost that game, is because for whatever reason, if you go 80% on 4th and 1 all season, that still means there's 20% you're not going to get it, and a couple of times against Tennessee, they didn't get it, and that's what swung those games. And so, there's a bunch of different ways. And listen, it's not going to play out the exact same way that the Chargers game played out, but if it happened to do so, the difference difference between the quarterback and the coach, and what we just described as the reason the Chargers didn't win that game, and didn't win that game by more than 3. The Ravens have that under control. And so it's not this sort of outrageous idea that we can lay points with Kansas City in this spot.
No, I like it. One thing I don't like, because it involves my San Francisco 49ers, was all the injuries that have been taking place. And, man, there are a lot of people coming into this season for obvious reasons saying that injuries would play a factor, and I don't think any team has been more affected than the Niners. Mind you, obviously Saquon going down is huge. Like, there's big injuries that have taken place for sure.
Sure, of course.
But the Niners, just to name a few, are playing without their best DB in Richard Sherman, their best player in George Kittle, who I think will come back this week. He's practicing, so we think he might be back. But Nick Bosa's done. Jimmy Garoppolo, done. Their best receiver, Debo, done. Mostert, their best running back, done. Then add in D Ford and Solomon Thomas. Like, it's just insane the amount of injuries the San Francisco 49ers have dealt with. But listeners to this pod, even though we don't even have a name yet, I think on last week's pod I said I had no trouble in taking the Niners against the Jets because it would be an organizational victory. And when the Niners start the game, and the first play of the game is an 80-yard TD run, it's like, what are the Jets doing? Like, the Jets, I don't know. It's just, it makes no sense. And then later on in the same game, they were able to convert on what was it? 3rd and 31 on a run play. 31.
So I got to step in here because so part of the thing that I sort of preach or, whatever on my podcast is, accountability and transparency. Right.
Yes.
And that's what we do. Right. We're talking about sports. I'm giving out bets every single day. Right. Yeah. And like, you have to be. And we don't just ignore when we lost the day before.
Hold on. In fairness, there are a lot of people out here that are not transparent about their losses, if we're being honest. Right. I'll fully call myself out on any and everything, but I just wanted to make that point.
Well, you know what though, but you're not doing this professionally, right? Like you're not analyzing and putting out picks professionally. And there's a ton of people out there who just do it, and then it's like, where's the accountability? There's none, right? Mm-hmm. And I start every episode with a segment called "Don't Look Back in Anger," because it's like we need to talk about what happened yesterday, right? Yeah. Win, lose, or draw. And correct. So, full disclosure, I did something. This is the dumbest thing I did last week. And every week you're going to do something stupid.
Yeah.
And last week, and listen, I'll give you my reasons for it, and you can sort of scold me for how dumb it actually was. But I wake up on Sunday, and again, like I look at already, and I go through all of these teams, right? And we talk about the bet tickets and all of that kind of stuff, right? And it's just like, man, San Francisco, everybody is on San Francisco. And I had the -6.5 ticket from earlier in the week, and that we talked about on this podcast. So if everybody out there listened to me and you talk about it, they cashed a San Francisco ticket. The one person who didn't cash a San Francisco ticket out there, me. I botched it because the line popped up on one rogue site. So the thing is like, okay, if everybody moves a line, that's one thing. But if I've got 4 sites going and one site ticks up to +7.5 for, in this case, the Jets, I think that's a mistake, right? And so part of what I do is I need to be able to take advantage of mistakes that sports books do, right? Yeah. And so when you get into the mathematics of it all, right? Like there's, I kind of broke it down on my Sunday podcast talking about, okay, percentage-wise, there's a percentage chance that the 49ers win this game exactly by 7, right? Okay. And because that's a key number, that percentage is probably around 10%. Well, if you've got -6.5, then that 10% is on your side. Yeah. And it adds to all of the other numbers. In this case, like, what did they end up winning by 25? Like, there was a small chance that they won by 25% all the way down the line. And so, but when the line moves to 7.5, the +7.5s now get that 10%. So you add that 10% to all the different ways that the Jets could cover, or the fact that that money line indicated about a 21, 22, something like that % chance of them winning outright. Now, after the game, we go, there was no way 22 is high enough or is low enough for that.
I got you.
But that's what the market said, right?
Yeah.
And so once that switches over, that 10% goes from there's a 60% chance for the 49ers cover. If that 10 goes from San Francisco over to the Jets, it becomes 60% for the Jets. And on top of that, if that game does land on 7, I win both sides of the bet. So in a lot of ways, it's a shot at taking all of the money down.
Getting all the money.
All the money, right?
Yeah.
And at 10% of a chance for essentially what would have been a 30-1 type of a payout, I was willing to do that, and I was willing to put a little bit more on the Jets side because of where that percentage landed. Now, I literally watched 2 plays in that game. Play 1 was the 80-yard touchdown. Play number 2 was the 3rd and 31. I saw both of those plays, and I knew that's all we need to watch from this entire game. But if you had told me before the game started that Bosa would be out, and Solomon Thomas would be out, and Garoppolo would be out, and I'd be like, 7.5. And it's not like that number ever went there with other sports books. And that book that offered the 7.5 immediately went back down to 7. So I wasn't the only one out there sort of hopping on that 7.5. That being said, hindsight being 20/20, dumb move. You can go back and listen to the explanation further. I pretty much gave the explanation just now, and then laugh at how dumb I was to sort of make that move.
But here's the thing.
That's what we do on the podcast, right?
No, but here's the thing, though. I think this is a great example of just the different sides and the different angles that we're coming at, right? What you just broke down and explained was looking at the numbers and trying to get the most value, the most money on all sides. That's not something that a lot of people, as I keep saying, the Joe Public people are even know about or even fully comprehend or understand. Right. So this is the beauty of what we're trying to do here, which is just have a conversation explaining all the different angles and sides and ways that you can go about picking these games. So, I mean, hey, the Jets continue to struggle, and we'll get to the Jets in a second because I do want to talk about the Jets because it's a very interesting line and an interesting narrative, I'll say. But the Niners still complaining about the turf at MetLife. Is there a -4 against the Giants? I like the Niners despite all the injuries. As mentioned, I think Kittle's going to come back. And Jimmy G, I think, is out. Nick Mullins is going to get the start. But I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell people this as a Niners fan. That doesn't matter. I'm just telling you straight up. Like, it literally doesn't matter.
Isn't that funny that, like, when it went from, like, it was 4.5, and it's like the quarterback change happens, and the market's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, a lot of times if a quarterback is questionable, right, like they'll wait to put up a line, right? So we'll get into like week 4 and so on, and it'll be like Wednesday, and it's like still no line for the Titans game because Tannehill took a shot to the head or something. And it's like with the 49ers, it's like you said with the organizational cover last week, it's like, it's about the same. Like, that's cool.
And -4 against the Giants. Saquon's gone, and I don't know how much I even like the Giants with Saquon so far this season. So it's like, okay, whatever. And Nick Mullins, there was talk, like, first off, the one thing we have to understand, and I'm saying this as a Niners like guy, Shanahan's never really been in love with Garoppolo to begin with anyways. There was a lot of rumors from last season about him being shaky with Jimmy G. So he's not even really sold on him fully. But I stress this all the time. The Niners offense is based off of structure and running schemes, and the passing game is just based off of that running scheme. So it's just hitting your reads, making your reads, don't make the mistakes, and you should be able to cover 4 points against the Giants, which we don't have to spend a lot of time on that. I think we're good, but do you have something there?
I do, and I'm wondering if you've got a clothespin over there because, again, I think this is another one where it's like you have to hold your nose and take the Giants, and I think the number where you take is +4.5 because, again, this is a market type thing, right? So the reality is, like, we're sitting here and we're going like, I don't think it matters that the quarterback is out for the 49ers. And that could be the case. And we're sort of in a gray area at 4.5 anyway, where it's like, you're not going to move it all the way up to 6. You're not going to move it. You're certainly not going to move it down to 3.
No.
And so, but it's the other stuff, right? It's that defense and the reputation of that defense. And you can start throwing in the D Fords and the DeForest Buckners and all of those guys who aren't on the team, or at least aren't, are from last year's team, that even if they haven't played last week, it's still, the reputation is still built from last season. All and valid. Right. And so, listen, the running back, Jerick McKinnon, will come in and he'll probably be awesome. Like, I think, as similarly, right, with Shanahan, I think he likes McKinnon better than the guys he's got anyway. It's just been an injury issue with why he hasn't been the starter. And nothing from last week where he had like 3 carries for 70 yards would indicate that that's not the case. Yeah. But so, from an offensive standpoint, it's not all that different. The Giants are sneaky good on defense. First 2 games. But we talk about early down success rate in my previews, right? Yeah. And what that means is sort of like, what position do you put yourself in for third down, both offensively and defensively, because that's how you get off the field. And the Giants on both rushing and pass defense are third in the league in early down success rate. Well, obviously the 49ers, with their run game, all of that kind of stuff, they don't want to be in third and long. They're not the Mahomes offense. And so they need to be good on first and second down. And so if the Giants are doing just enough defensively to be able to slow that down, then I think that bodes well for sort of a lower scoring game. And on the flip side, like, Saquon Barkley is out, and he's a big name, and that sucks for whoever, drafted him first in the first round in fantasy. But running backs just don't matter when it comes to a point spread on a consistent basis. So if you think that they do, then you're going to overrate this loss. And there's kind of no way to underrate it, right? Like, you're not going to be like, they're better without Saquon.
Yeah. No, I got you. I know what you're saying.
They're about the same, right? Like, they didn't really get anything from him. They didn't really get anything from him on Monday night against Pittsburgh. They didn't really get anything they were down 17-0 to the Bears when he went out. Like, I was on the Giants and I was like, well, that's cooked. And then all of a sudden, right, they come back and they cover and they darn near win it, right? And so if it just means that Daniel Jones is able to throw it around a little bit, like, against a defense that, again, shadow of its former self, and not for any reason other than injuries, right? Like, it's not their fault.
Taking the points.
Right? So it's just like, this kind of feels like one where it's very easy to be like, scene of the crime from last week. Like, oh, I'm never going to go against the 49ers again. Or like, the Jets are the same as the Giants. I don't think the Giants and the Jets are the same. And
I don't think anyone's the Jets.
Nobody's the Jets. And so, like, again, hold your nose, grab the clothespin, throw it on there, bet it, induce the coma, wake up Sunday night, see how you did. I think that's just in that sort of, I always talk about buckets on my thing, right, on my podcast. This one is sort of this stinky bucket. We're adding a third bucket this week, and it's just the stinky fish bucket, and that's in the bucket for me.
So I got you. And I like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not liking the fact that I'm taking the Niners, but I'm taking the Niners. And I hear you, and I totally understand. And, hey, I don't even know how many things I like this week, right?
Sure.
But you mentioned the clothespin and the stinky picks, which leads us perfectly to the Jets.
Yeah.
And the Jets, I have them right now at 10.5 point underdogs to the Colts. I don't like it one bit. I definitely don't. But there's a narrative we talk about all the time. And I always say, some people have the hard set rule of double-digit spreads. Just take the points. Don't look back, because over the math of the long-term game, the numbers show you always take the points. You're going to end up with more wins than losses. So I'm on the Jets, but I obviously don't like it. But I will say this, as you mentioned, we talked about this more so last week than this week, but I still think it fits. The Jets have become the laughingstock of the entire NFL, right? They have now had to listen to everybody make fun of them, their family, their friends, TV analysts, random dudes on podcasts, right? Yeah. Just laugh at them. And then now you're going to be 10.5 point underdogs to the Colts.
Right. Yeah.
You kind of got to come out and show some pride here. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying win the game, but keep it close. Keep it in the mix. Like, come out, as you mentioned at the top, with some focus to not get your doors blown off. No?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're 100% right. I'll sort of, I'm one of those guys who's like double digit, you got to take it. Right. And it's sort of within the framework of, my mom, your parents have these sayings, right? And like, so my mom back in the day, like, I'm 6 years old and I'm like demanding something, who knows, I'm just being a jerk, right? And she would say, who died and made you king? Mm-hmm. And I sort of apply that and I go, who died and made the Colts double-digit favorites against anybody, right? Like, I understand why the Chiefs would be double-digit favorites at home against somebody. I understand why the Ravens would be. You could talk me into the Saints, the Seahawks, etc., right? Mm-hmm. But there's this middle part of the league that I think the Colts sort of travel in. They're the team that lost to the Jags. They played pretty well, but they lost to the Jags. They beat up the Vikings, but they weren't really all that impressive in doing so. And so they're in that middle part. On the underdog side of things, if it's a double-digit underdog and it's Larry from like Eastern Washington who's the quarterback because somebody's been injured, right? Like Luke Falk when Sam Darnold had his mono. It's like, that guy's not a professional quarterback.
About that.
Right? And so like, that guy's not a professional quarterback. So don't bet on him under any circumstance. Just walk away. And if you really want to get loose, like, take the favorite. In this case, Sam Darnold's a functional quarterback who, if he was with a coach that had any sense of anything, he'd probably be pretty successful. His arm strength is incredible. And he has had some turnover issues in the past, like literally since college. I was the one who was going like, I'm not loving Sam Darnold because that guy fumbles the ball a ton and is super loose with it. And so that can get you in trouble, of course. And so it's not a comfortable play, but you've got a functional quarterback with the Jets, and you've got a team that isn't in that cream of the crop type of a level. And you've got a market right now that doesn't want anything to do with the Jets. So of course that's going to be inflated. And you referenced 10.5, like it's really 11, and even in some spots 11.5, and I think could even go a little bit higher, but 11.5 is good enough for me because I don't think this game lands on 12. That's a pretty rare number to land on from a game result standpoint. 11.5 is good enough for me, but this is another one that I'll wait for Sunday and see how many we can get, just because I'm kind of greedy in that way.
I like it. One more before we get to like how we close off the week, but
let's do it.
The Rams and Bills, I think, is a game we should really talk about, just because we're talking about 2-0 teams, but also there's a lot of hype machine. The hype machine is building in Western New York in terms of the Buffalo Bills, and there's a lot of hype. And I look at it and say, I'll always have trouble buying into the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is still a little too loose for me. The numbers are great, and I see it, and I get it. Cool. But I got to take the Rams in the points here. Rams +2 over the Bills. I don't know. I can't buy into the Buffalo Bills. I just can't do it.
I understand that. And listen, I was watching that game against Miami, and I don't know how much you watched that because it was super weird with like delays and like at one point, like the broadcast cut out for a while, and it was like a whole thing. And so
that was incredible.
But for me, I'm watching that going, I think we have to reframe how we look at the Bills, because we've been beaten into this like they have a good defense, and if they can just do enough offensively and yada, yada, yada. Brian Daboll, their offensive coordinator, who's now been there for a couple of years, and has gotten the reins on Josh Allen to the point where they are running just a really impressive offense right now. And I love my mobile quarterbacks and all of that stuff. And so for me, for this game, like, I'm seeing a lot of people liking the Rams here because of how that season has started for them. And listen, the one pick I got wrong on my 5 contest picks last week was fading the Rams on the road against the Eagles. And, again, if things go a little bit differently and Wentz doesn't force an interception into the end zone, maybe that ends up working out in the end. Yeah. In this case, like, unlike San Francisco that stayed out east, right? San Francisco went to actually West Virginia to hang out for the week so that they didn't have to travel across country. The Rams have gone home and are going back across to Buffalo.
I don't like that at all.
This is On the road, Jared Goff has never been very good. And again, he certainly was a lot better last week. And so I have to eat some crow with that. And again, full transparency, like that's what we do here.
Yeah.
I think that we are still underrating the Bills because they haven't played anybody just yet. But even kind of at the worst of times, isn't this a game against kind of the higher octane offense who's, traveling into Buffalo? Like, I wish there'd be some snowflakes or something. It's going to be pretty nice, unfortunately. And of course, there's no fans and all of that kind of stuff. But like, isn't this one that the Bills would pull off as like one of their 6 wins, right? Because they were never like the worst team in the league because twice a year they knock off that middle part, right? Whether it's the Colts, whether it's the Rams, we're not talking upper echelon here.
Very
that
true.
Meaty part of the league, and I'm not super sure that the Bills aren't better than the Rams are. As part of it. And I understand why that number is not 3. So this isn't like, why is the line so low, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. I get why if it goes to 3, you bet the Rams and then you just kind of see what goes on from there. I think every time it goes to 3, people bet the Rams because they know that it's going to go back to 2.5 and they can bet over the top on the Bills.
Trying to get both.
And I think there's sort of a game going on with the big money syndicates and stuff out there right now. That one's a really interesting game for me, and I really like the Bills in that. And the key to that, though, is they were without two linebackers last week against the Dolphins, and that's why Mike Gesicki made absolute hay on offense. The fantasy people know this, right? Mm-hmm. And Tyler Higbee will probably do the same if those guys aren't back for Buffalo. So that's the one thing come Friday when the injury reports come out. I need those 2 guys, or at least one of them, to be back in the lineup. And I think if they're not, you'll see that line move closer to pick them even. And then it'll be a real judgment call coming down the stretch there. But I like the Bills, and I think we have to start thinking of them almost like closer to like, not necessarily the Jim Kelly era, but like that they're capable of being a really good offensive team.
So as we continue on here, just as we look to kind of wrap things up, though, there's 2 things that have become staples here as we close the podcast. And the first one is the sucker bet of the week. You alluded to what we were talking about last week, the Rams and Eagles, but as we try to get back on the right train here with the sucker bet of the week, who do you like in week 3?
So the sucker bet of the week, we were wrong last week, but that's the problem with doing this on Thursday, right? Is that there's still so much time between now and Sunday to sort of feel out where the market's going. And after we taped the podcast on Thursday morning last week, over the course of the next few days, you start to see people piling up on the Eagles side. And at that point, it ceases to be a sucker bet because enough people are talking about it and the line is moving towards the Eagles. And you go, oh my God, it's almost like a reverse sucker bet type of a thing, right? And at which point, like, I would have potentially assigned the Saints as the sucker bet or the Chiefs as the sucker bet, basically road favorites of a pretty significant number. And so this week, and listen, I've already got a Tennessee minus 2.5 ticket in my account. But part of it is, listen, it's hard to make a case for the Vikings. I think the Vikings stink. Let me just say that. I think the Vikings stink this year. That being said, there's something really fishy about the fact that this line hasn't gotten to 3 yet, and we're talking 79% on people on Tennessee, as though, and again, I referenced it earlier, who died and made Tennessee road favorites, right? Like, okay, they made the playoffs and all of that stuff was really exciting last year, but like they've gotten out yards per played in both of their games this season, right? Like they, 4.8 to 5.5 to Denver, who's not exactly an offensive juggernaut, and 6.0 to 6.5 on the Jags side last week, right? They almost lost that game, probably should have. So this idea that like Tennessee's going to kill the Vikings and it's like fait accompli, like I'm really starting to be like, oh my God, this is the mother of all clothespin games. I'm going to have to bet the Vikings here. I want 3. I needed to get to 3 before I do it, but like is something super fishy and super suckery about that game. And as far as the Survivor one, I don't think it's all that complicated, man. I think you just take the Colts and you move on to week 4.
So are we at the point where we keep fading the Bills or fading the Jets each week?
We are. Certainly, again, I have a couple of rules. One, let's make sure we're the home team A little bit less important this season, but I'm not going to stray away from it.
Yeah.
And let's try to avoid divisional matchups, right? Because there's such a familiarity there with underdogs that you want to kind of avoid that. And so there just isn't anything else that I love, because I think all of the other favorites, with the exception of the Patriots, but there's going to be better spots to use the Patriots, i.e. against the Jets, that like all of these other ones, like I'm going to be firing on underdog money lines this week.
Okay. All right. I like it. I'm down with you here on taking or fading the Jets until further notice. And I do like the points with the Jets. Sucker bet, I'm with you there. I think there's a lot of people that are going to be looking at Kirk Cousins' performance last week and thinking, yeah.
Yeah,
so
he's atrocious,
I like it.
That happens, right? He's the king of being atrocious one week and being good the next. That's why he's never going to get it done sort of in a long-term way.
Exactly. So, yeah, that wraps up another week. And, of course, pay attention carefully. All the points matter. That is the key. All the points, all the half points. This is going to be a very tough week. I'm giving you the warning right now, and my full picks will be up probably somewhere on Saturday, but we try to just meet on Thursday, go through the lines, talk about where I'm thinking, and Mr. Russell tells me where I'm crazy. That's basically what we're doing here, trying to add context to the picks. But if you don't follow Mr. Russell on Twitter, you should. If you don't listen to the Window podcast, you should. Mr. Russell, give the people the info where they can get the goodness, the information that you love to provide to the gamblers out there.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, we do a Monday to Friday podcast. It's called The Window sports betting podcast. Type anything, any combination of those into your favorite podcast distributor. You can find me at MRuss Authentic, MRUSS for Matt Russell, and then the word authentic, no underscores, none of that stuff. MRuss Authentic on Twitter. I'll throw out different live betting things that I do, different sports, right? Like right now, college football is so wacky that I have to wait till like Saturday morning to make sure that all of the players that are supposed to play. Like that type of stuff goes out on Twitter, all of that kind of stuff. And we also sort of commiserate about various bets on Twitter and that kind of thing too. So Monday to Friday, The Window, and then on Sunday as well. So all of the stuff that we talked about, how you were saying, be aware of your Instagram posts. It's the same thing. Sunday morning around 11:30, I publish a podcast that I do that morning, and we talk about, okay, what are the 5 circa million picks, right? That's the contest that we do where you pick 5 games against the spread for $1 million. Those are my sort of big bets of the week. And then I talk about all of the other stuff that, is on the board. We get into some totals. We get into some props. We get into the teases that we like. We get into the money lines that we like, that we are going to be big time aggressive on this week. Like Sheldon says, be careful. I say be aggressive, but be aggressive in going against the grain this week. Hold your nose and fire this week. So Friday, it's a lot like this, where we're just kind of going through the games and talking out loud. And then Sunday is, what do we got? What are we doing? And solidifying a lot of stuff there. So the Window podcast, like I said, you can type my name in and it pops up. Apple, Google, Spotify, the whole darn thing.
Beautiful, man. I love it. And thank you again for coming and joining in on this pod every week. It's so much fun to talk NFL and break it down with you and give such different insights to the fans of the On Blast Podcast Network. Really appreciate it, my dude. Thank you so much, because I have so much fun with this pod. It's been a lot of fun, really enjoying it each and every week. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in to this, what we continue to call, I'll name this football pod later, part of the On Blast Podcast Network, as we continue to grow and just do some more stuff here on the network. We still got our Ball on Blast podcast still rocking each and every week with Andrew Webster, where we break down everything on and off the court in the NBA. But in terms of this, enjoy your Thursday, enjoy the Thursday nighter, enjoy week 3 of the NFL. And as I close every podcast, I really did used to pray for times like this, to rhyme like this. This is, I'll name this football pod later. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.
On blast.